Before we jump into today's episode, we need to have a few words from our sponsor. Hey, it's JJ.
Are you the sponsor?
I am the sponsor of today's episode.
My wife is the sponsor.
Yeah, I wanted to tell everybody that I Dream of You Volume 3 is officially out everywhere.
You can listen to it right now instead of listening to instrumental.
No, I guess. But this is going to be a really good episode, so maybe listen to it after.
Or here's what you could do. You could just say, hey, Alexa, play I Dream of You Volume 3 by J.J. Heller. And she'll play it on some other speaker, and then you can listen to the album and instrumental on your phone.
Somehow this got really complicated.
Oh, man, there are so many more ways to make it complicated. Like, here, hold these flaming bowling pins.
While listening to the podcast and I Dream of You Volume 3.
Juggle these flaming bowling pins.
Just tell Alexa, Google, or Siri, play I Dream of You Volume 3 by J.J. Heller. My version of some of the best romantic love songs of all time.
I mean, in some cases, I kind of feel like they're better than the original.
Shh, don't say that.
All right, now on to the show.
I'm J.J. Heller, and this is Instrumental, a show about the big and small moments that shape our lives. Big love happens in the small moments. Hey everyone, it's JJ.
And her husband, Dave.
And we have a wonderful episode for you today. We are interviewing our dear friend, Joy Prouty.
The Joy Prouty.
She is an insanely talented photographer, filmmaker, mom, wife, storyteller, nurturing spirit.
Joy has made a bunch of music videos for us,
including I Believe in You, Grand Adventure, Missing Piece,
which she actually starred in.
Yes. Big Love, Small Moment.
Long Way Home, A Mother Like You. She shot the live performance footage for The Best Thing.
And It'll Be All Right.
Hand to Hold.
Yeah.
We've been collaborating with her quite a bit over the last 2 years.
Because she's the best. She is amazing. One thing I think is really special about Joy is she is the kind of person who is just off the charts talented, and yet she's not intimidating. She has this spirit about her that is so welcoming and nurturing, and she is able to pull out that spark and that creativity in everybody around her.
Mm-hmm.
She did a photo shoot for me a few months ago, and I can often feel really nervous and kind of uptight during photo shoots because everybody's staring at you and it feels like a lot of pressure. And somehow she just put me totally at ease. I think there's just like God has given her this gift that allows other people around her to feel like they can just be themselves.
If you're new to Instrumental, we tell the stories of our guests backwards. So we're going to start at the most recent part of Joy's story. Here we go.
Act 3, The Beauty of Stillness. In 2019, Joy discovered she was pregnant with her 6th child. At the same time, she was suffering from a variety of negative health symptoms. A diagnosis provided answers, but it also led to many more questions about her own health and the health of the baby growing in her belly. Joy will explain more.
I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 10 weeks pregnant last May. So my son is almost a year old. When I was diagnosed, it was a total shock. I mean, I was 38 and didn't know anything was wrong. I thought I was just really tired. And I went to go see my midwife. We were planning for another home birth because that had gone so well with our previous son.
Well, but you had been having intense migraines too, right?
Yes, I had been struggling for a long time, and the doctor does believe that that had just been different symptoms of diabetes, and I hadn't really been, it was like a honeymoon period is what they call it, that I was kind of surviving. But yeah, I had been trying to figure out all kinds of body issues and pain for several years. Sometimes the diabetes can just be dormant in your system, and then it's like strongly activated when you get a virus. So when I was pregnant at 9 weeks, I got sick and I had a really high fever, and they think that's what triggered it into full blown, where if I had not gone to the hospital that following week, I definitely would have died. All of my
Wow.
organs were turning like acidic. The blood turns acidic. It's called DKA. And my body was just under severe attack. And they don't know exactly, what damage had been done. So basically, I got diagnosed and they said the probability of your baby surviving is very low. And if he does, he's going to have a lot of challenges. And they asked if I wanted to consider terminating the pregnancy. And there was just all these teams of people coming in, giving me all kinds of advice and suggestions and information. And I was all alone in the hospital and very confused. My brother is a type 1 diabetic, so I knew what kind of life I was looking at. He has been diagnosed since he was 12. I knew what that meant, and that it would mean that I would have to really take excellent care of myself. And I think it was a grace that God allowed me to have this diagnosis while pregnant, because it forced me to have to really care for myself in such an intense, loving way that included so much presence to keep my blood sugar steady. And it was just a real challenge. But I had a little human that I was trying to take care of. So God really taught me how to nurture myself in that time frame. And there was this one moment that I was laying in that hospital bed, and I had just posted on my Instagram about being diagnosed. And someone sent me a message, and she said, I am so excited to see how your creativity and this can combine. And I was really kind of bothered by that, because I was still processing, and I was like, how can this be good? This actually means a lot of difficulty. Like, you don't understand what's going on with my baby. No one knew I was pregnant at that point. And so I sat with that for a long time. And all those days when I was learning, the early days at home, when I was learning about how to give myself injections and all the different things that affected my blood sugar, one of them being stress as a major thing. Like, if I would let my anxiety really get to me and like kind of give into that, I would watch on the meter my blood sugar spike by 100 points, which is, it's really dangerous. So I started to become really aware of the way stress was affecting my body and all of the hustle I had been putting myself through for so long. And I sat with those words that woman had written me, and I thought, okay, maybe I can think about that now. How can I use my creativity to speak to this? And what it's done for me over the last 18 months, number one, because of being pregnant and this diagnosis, it made me have to cancel quite a bit of traveling work because I had to take care of myself. And so I think in a way, whereas in 2020, so many people have been shocked with how everything has been taken away, I think that I was kind of already getting used to that. At the time of being diagnosed, I was just completing the first run of my online course. So in many ways, I think that God was setting these things up in a way for me to still continue doing the work, which I love to do, which is helping people get to the bottom of their own stories and making art of that. It was like I was being set up with a way to do that from home that would allow me to practice stillness and to care for myself while still doing my work in a different way. It was very hard for me to transition and feel like I couldn't be with people. But one thing it did do, and with you guys, that really helped me to figure out, okay, I've been using my creativity to tell the stories of other people all these years. And I think maybe what it's time for me to do is to use my creativity to tell my own. And so even the video that we made together of
Missing piece.
Yes, that line about not needing answers, but needing peace. That was really the theme of all of last year for me, especially not knowing if my son was going to survive. We got news that there was a part of his brain that was missing on a scan, and things might not be exactly the way I thought they were going to be, but how can I creatively use this as an opportunity to grow or make art from this experience.
And so what was the kind of culmination of that?
One thing that was really hard for me when I first got diagnosed is my eyesight suffered. And I would go days not being able to see. And what happens when your blood sugar has been so out of whack for so long is it has to regulate, but in that regulation time, everything goes blurry. And so I would have these patches where hours a day for the first couple months I was diagnosed, I wouldn't be able to see anything except for blur. And I started to think about, okay, I'm a visual artist. Even if my eyesight is not long-term affected, I have to understand that as a type 1 diabetic, my vision is going to be one of my first things that I lose, hopefully not for a long time. And maybe they'll come up with a cure in my lifetime. I'm not sure. So I started thinking, okay, like I've kind of vested all my giftedness, all of my messages. They've all been translating through the visual. So I think now maybe I need to go internal and start to really look at all of the lessons that I've gained from all of these years and all of these different transitions and leaps of faith. I need to just write those things down. I need to get them out. And so I basically spent that whole pregnancy leaving myself voice memos, thinking of stories, writing down experiences that I learned from my career, trying to find all of the work that spoke to me. I started filming my kids a lot more because I thought, I don't know if I'll be able to see them. Like I want to remember, and also video, I need to hear the sound of their voices. I found myself being more present than ever before. And instead of making art, I started to make my lifestyle one that was artistic, which is like the living of this life. And my doctor, she said this thing to me when I was about halfway through the pregnancy, and I had been doing really well on taking care of my blood sugar numbers. I was checking like 15 times a day. I just knew unfortunately, the reality was that if I let my numbers get out of control, it would damage Webb, the baby. I was very conscious of always taking care of myself, and I didn't put stress on myself. I was just conscious of it all the time. And my doctor said to me, she said, "Joy, your numbers are excellent." And I was like, "Oh, great, thank you." And she said, I think the reason that you're doing so well at this is that you're viewing it as an art instead of a science. And she did not know that I was an artist. And I wrote that down. I thought about that every day. And that, I think, is really the way I have gotten through the last 16 months. And I think the people that are, finding the joy in this time of pandemic, it's because they're doing the same thing. When you view it as a science, like needing an end date and needing to know the specifications, you hold yourself to this perfectionism that is impossible, which breeds stress. And again, I could not make myself stress because it would affect my blood sugar. So I had to learn breathing techniques, and I was being creative and being present, and my body was reaping the benefits of great health because of my ability. I had taught myself stillness as an art.
So you had the scan of Webb's brain that showed that a part of it was missing. And how did things turn out with him?
For 2 months, they couldn't find that on multiple scans. And it wasn't surprising, because I had assumed that there would probably be some challenges for him. But I just carried the knowledge of that in our family. My mom is a teacher of children with special needs. And so she said, "Joy, we're equipped and everything is going to be fine. And I'm going to be able to help teach him." And it just, in my mind, I just came to accept and was really actually looking forward to whatever God had for us with this child. And I just had total peace. I can't explain it. It's supernatural. I don't understand. But when I saw that, of course, I would get worried, but then I had trained myself not to worry. And so I just, I was sitting in this place of peace. And that's why your song, Missing Piece, means so much to me. So about a month before he was born, we went in for another scan, and the doctor he was like, oh yeah, there it is. It's there. And I couldn't see anything, and neither could the nurses. And the nurse says, it's not there. You know, it was like the original scan. This was like scan number 4. And then the doctor, he was like, it's there. And the nurse says, it's not there. It's just a black spot. It was this same like kind of empty black hole that they were seeing in every other scan. And he said, and I know this doctor was sent straight from God to speak to me that day. And he said, now look at all the other pieces around that piece. And he was showing me on the, the brain scan what he was seeing. And he said, now I know we can't see it there, but if it wasn't there, even though we can't see it, if it wasn't there, all of the pieces around it would be misplaced. And so we have to trust and have faith that piece is there, because we would be able to see something out of alignment if it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And it was such a gift to have these doctors that were speaking these metaphors to me.
That's my language.
Yeah, I know. It was just so great. I wrote down and have treasured each of those statements. And so I just had faith that if that doctor said that I would believe that he was okay. And when he was born, they said that if he's okay, the chance of him being diabetic is pretty strong, or at least having some kind of blood sugar issues. He'll definitely have to go to the NICU. Just being prepared that even if he's going to survive, there's going to be a slew of other things that you're going to have to just be okay with. And so I was determined to have a natural birth, and I wanted to feel every part of that and be able to be fully present for him when he came out, if there was a limited amount of time. They had me on so many monitors. Being diabetic, I was so high risk, and they needed to make sure that they had all of these different plans in place in case something happened to me, if they lost me during delivery, or whatever, if they needed C-section right away, something like that. It's fairly painful to have a natural birth while being induced with all the meds and being connected to all the machines like I was. It was an incredibly painful and traumatic long birth, but he came out, and I remember seeing him, and not only did he have blonde hair and blue eyes, like I couldn't believe that he was mine, and he was okay. And he started crying, and he was so alert, and they took him over to the warming monitor, and the first thing that they had to do was take his blood sugar. And I was so exhausted. I was almost passing out. Donnie thought for sure something was going to happen to me during the delivery, because I felt so displaced from my body. And I was just watching, all curled up there, kind of almost asleep in pain, just watching to see if he was going to be okay. And they pricked him, and they said that his blood sugar was normal, and that he weighed the perfect amount, and his APGARs were almost perfect. And they could not find any trace of any of the things that they thought could go wrong. And not only that, but that he was healthy and thriving. He was born so alert, it was like he was born with a message. And the same week that we had actually found out that we were pregnant with Webb, Donnie's best friend had committed suicide. And it was a season of intense grief where it was very difficult for him to be happy about this baby. And then his wife gets diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and he had just been shouldering the grief and worry of so much. And so when this baby was born, I was too tired to hold him. And so I said, Donnie, you hold him. And he's holding this baby, and the baby, Webb is looking up at Donnie with these huge eyes. I've had 6 children and seen them all afterward, and I never have had this experience of seeing such an alert newborn. And I've been at many births too, and never have seen anything like it. It was literally like he came out to say something to Donnie, and Donnie's holding him, and you can see it in some of the footage. And Donnie's just weeping, like his tears are just falling on Webb's little body all wrapped up. And they're looking at each other there was no doubt in my mind that if all of this, who knows what the purpose is for all things, right? But that moment of seeing them look at each other, it was the ultimate gift of seeing this is the beauty of stillness. This is the beauty of peace, that I had a million answers that were telling me, do not have hope, despair, keep despairing. And I just leaned on the art of hoping. And then I was staring at them look each other. It's a moment I'll never forget.
That is such an incredible story and a beautiful example of joy making a practice out of being present in each and every moment.
Joy and Donnie were actually both very gracious in allowing us to use footage from Joy's pregnancy and delivery in the music video for JJ's song Missing Piece.
I remember that Joy and Donnie came over to our house because we were working on another project with them. And before they left, Dave said, "Hey, you guys want to hear a song that we just finished?" And Joy and Donnie just sat on the couch, and I think they were both crying by the end of it. And Joy just said that she could so relate to that idea of searching for answers, but really needing God's peace. And it was her idea to start recording her pregnancy journey. And it was at a time when they didn't know how it was going to turn out.
So baby Webb was born healthy, and we had footage of that. And then we needed to get more footage of JJ singing for the Missing Piece music video. And just a few weeks later, Joy brought Webb in a little baby wrap on the shoot for the live performance footage for that video. And it's so fun that he was a part of the entire making of project.
That's right.
He was there for it all.
It's time to go back in time in Joy's story to 2008.
JJ, do you remember what happened in 2008?
I remember some stuff that happened in 2008.
Well, here's something that happened. It's very important to the world of science.
Okay.
The Large Hadron Collider was turned on in Europe.
Okay.
So I'm going to just quiz you for a second about some things about the Hadron Collider.
Okay, perfect.
What is the circumference of the Hadron Collider?
2 centimeters.
2 centimeters?
Yes.
Close. 26 miles. Okay. It's a giant machine, and it's full of magnets. How many magnets does it have in it?
Well, let's say 6,726.
That's pretty close. 9,593. Okay.
Oh.
Last question.
Okay.
It's speeding like particles around that 26-mile loop really, really fast. How many collisions happen in it per second?
12.
Super close. 1 billion.
What do I win?
You win getting to hear Joy's story.
Yay, the best prize of all.
What happened to her in 2008?
Oh, goodness.
So this giant particle accelerator was about to be turned on, and Joy Prouty was about to be thrust into the national spotlight. Let's hear about it.
Act 2, The Harvest. Joy's career in photography had a lot of momentum from the very beginning. As she began developing her skill as a photographer of families and babies, it wasn't long before some unique opportunities began to present themselves.
My family lived in Thousand Oaks, but I was going to Pepperdine. And so we were living in this area where it was very well-to-do families, a lot of celebrities with families that lived in the area. And it didn't take long for me to kind of get my foot in the door with families that wanted happy pictures of their family. And some of them were famous. And I know it's rare to just kind of start out at the beginning with a very lucrative clientele, but that's what happened. It took off very quickly. And I was photographing newborns at that time, just winging it. I didn't really know if this was something that was going to become a career, but I knew that I was enjoying it and that it was making people happy. I was teaching gymnastics to small children part-time, and I was taking pictures of families pretty much any other time I had available. I didn't have a spouse. I didn't have children at that time. So I was really just burning the candle at both ends. And I was really enjoying it. And people's reactions to what I was creating just kept filling me up. I think I really enjoyed that. But I don't even think I was shooting in manual mode at that point. I was still shooting in auto on my camera. So in all of these ways, I was kind of having this success, but simultaneously I was having imposter syndrome, which I think is very common for people that are just starting out. And someone knew someone that got me in touch with one of the anchors from Entertainment Tonight.
Wow.
And she said, I would love to have you take newborn pictures of my baby. And would you mind, because I'm the anchor of the show, if a film crew was there and they did a segment on my new baby and you taking the pictures and how this is kind of a trend right now. So this was, we're talking like 16 years ago when newborn photography, curled up nude babies with pretty fabric and things like that all around them.
What was the name of the
Ann
really
Geddes.
Yes,
Ann
Ann
Geddes,
Geddes was like a big deal. Like everyone wanted to be like Ann.
Yeah, I pretty much in my mom's garage, as I was like learning to do all of these things, I painted backdrops and hung them up and got studio lighting. And I would spend hours glue gunning like plastic daisies onto head caps to put on toddlers because I wanted to be like Ann Geddes. Like that was totally, that was the time.
Was that the first celebrity family that you had photographed?
Several people from 90210, several people from the cast of Party of Five. Okay, one of my first celebrity clients was Scott Wolf from Party of Five.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, my sister had a huge crush on him.
As did I. So did I. So, I would never miss an episode with Bailey in it. So it was just pretty surreal to, at the beginning of my career, going into the homes of people that I had really looked up to. And I was invited in and saw how they lived life. And I was so excited about my session with Scott Wolf's family. It was their first baby. I got a sty in my eye the day before, which is caused by stress. And I had never had one before. And it's actually pretty disgusting. Like it looks like you have pink eye, but it's like you don't want to look at it. And the way that I was taking pictures at that time was very, intimate. I was holding people's newborns and we would have to pump the heat up in the house to like 90 so that the baby would stay quiet and calm and sleepy through the session because the baby was only like a week old. So anyway, I got this sty and I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is my dream come true. I cannot show up at their house looking like a zombie.
Monster.
Yeah. Donnie and I had just started dating at that point, and he said, well, why don't you wear a patch, an eye patch, and you just say like you scratched your cornea or something. And so I was like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. And so I wore an eye patch thinking this will be fine. It was on my left eye. I was able to still shoot with the camera with my right eye. So I show up at their house with this on thinking, oh, this is a great idea. And he's so sweet. He opens the door and he's like, hey, he gives me a hug. So nice to meet you. And he's just like looking at my eye patch. And, I said, oh, I had something happen in my eye. Don't worry. It's not contagious. Everything's fine. He's like, oh, yeah. So we go through maybe 3 hours of the session and it was wonderful. His wife made this homemade bread and it was just this dreamy experience. But you remember it was super hot. And slowly throughout the session, my eye patch kept dripping down, like it was getting wet and sweaty because I get so sweaty when I shoot, and it just started falling down my face. And so I had to keep on in between taking pictures, just like re-putting my eye patch up, and like I thought I was going to die of sheer embarrassment at this point. When it was over, he said, I've been wanting to say this the whole time. I just want to draw like a pirate eye on your eye patch so bad. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, we were both just thinking about it the entire time. But I will never forget how, my dream came true. And all he could think about was how I looked like a pirate the entire time. So I became close with a lot of people in that area. There's a big trust that's built when you're holding someone's baby and being invited into their home. And which then led to being able to have a spot on an Entertainment Tonight segment.
Did you wear an eye patch?
Luckily, there was no eye patch situation happening with that. I would be known for something else maybe completely if that had been the case.
The pirate photographer.
Yeah.
Let me hold your child.
Yeah. Your photos are going to be great.
Wow.
I was just floating on this sea of success in a way. I couldn't believe it was happening.
And I imagine, like, in celebrity culture, they're probably a pretty tight-knit group. And they probably, if they find a great hairstylist or makeup artist or massage therapist or whatever, they're going to tell all their friends and then they're in. So,
Yes.
like, I imagine it's the same thing with photography and with you.
It really was. And even just them sending Christmas cards out, that was really one of the main ways that I was able to market to their friends is I would do these elaborate Christmas cards that were like, there would be like 12 photos on them and they would be trifold and they were like gallery exhibits on their own. And so when they would send these out to their friends, I mean, they had a very select group, so less than 100 people. And if their friend receives this beautiful, like fold out gallery of these photos and then they flip to the back, oh, who did it? And there's my website right there. That was a lot of the reason my business began to grow.
Wow.
I photographed this couple that I was close with them in the area and they loved the movie Up. And do you remember that movie?
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
It's just the sweetest ever. And this couple, it was their favorite movie. And now remember, we were living in Calabasas at the time, which is right next to Malibu. So it's kind of like in this zone where a lot of people were starting to get excited about having like themed weddings, like Midsummer Night's Dream. It hadn't really been a thing up until that point, or at least it hadn't been documented and put online yet. This was at the beginning of wedding blogs. And so this couple, they came to me and told me their favorite movie was Up, that they were going to have an Up-themed wedding. And he had proposed to her by floating a ring in a box on a balloon to her. And like everything about their story, they had an adventure book.
Gosh, floating a box on a balloon, that just sounds so dangerous.
With diamonds
it's like,
inside.
There goes the engagement ring.
It was a very small one with a helium balloon. So,
Yeah.
and it was inside, but it was just,
Okay.
it basically infused all of these cool things about the movie Up into their relationship already. And so I thought, oh my gosh, you guys, we have to do your engagement shoot Up themed. I remember sitting on my couch and being like, oh, nobody's done this. Like I always wanted to be doing something that people hadn't thought of yet or hadn't done yet. And that was not a thing. And so we planned this whole thing out. He had all these different ties. And so it was like, you know, that scene from Up where she's like straightening his tie to get ready to go for the day of work as a zookeeper. He tries on these different ties. And so it's like we kind of played out this whole thing in their photos. We took all of these like big chairs, like a his and her chair, and put it out under a tree. So I submitted it to Wedding Blog at that time, the Wedding Chicks. I don't know if they're even around anymore, if anyone remembers that. And they accepted it right away and they put it on the blog, I think the next week. And I think it had something like over 1 billion views.
What?
And yes, because nothing was like it out there.
Wow.
Like none of that was happening. This was like brand new on the scene. And so I was like, okay, like people are into this. Let's do a second round. And so, because we had even more ideas that we hadn't accomplished in the first shoot and they were all about it. And they were so excited by, you know, how much people loved it too. And it just opened up this idea of making a photo shoot more than just a photo of a documentation, right? Actually telling a story through it. And so we did another one and I sent that to a different wedding blog and they posted it and it got the same, you know, billions of views around the world. And Pixar, the people who made the movie Up, they contacted me and the couple. They invited the couple to come to San Francisco and
Wow.
tour the back lot. And they got to meet like everyone in the office and they gave them this really special commemorative book. And it was like a massive deal.
Oh my gosh.
It was amazing. And I started getting calls from all over the world. I had couples that flew in. It was like super huge in Japan and China because of the animation. And so I had tons of couples that were flying in from all over the country for me to photograph them and tell their story in unique ways. So I did every kind of storyline you could think of. Like I had the most fun because it allowed me to use my creativity while also telling someone's special story. The place where I started to feel unfulfilled is when I started getting so many inquiries to do this for people, but they didn't want it to be their own story. They started to ask for Beauty and the Beast, right? Like this couple that wanted me to build a set. Basically, I was building sets. I was being paid all this money to build these sets and put these people into these sets. And it started to become, people just wanted the...
It's like you were an amusement park ride instead of a storyteller.
Yeah. And that's where I started to develop some unease with these happy kinds of bright, shiny photos, is the truth started to become less important, and the way it looked started to become the most important thing, is how people were perceiving that. My health was really deteriorating. It was too much on my shoulders. I'd had a miscarriage. I was in continual pain. Our family was starting to suffer, and we said, what can we do? We decided to sell our house and sell all of our stuff. And this is when Instagram was just starting too. And so my Instagram following was quite large from that point. That's kind of what was the jumpstart to my online presence. And people loved that journey. They were like, we wish we could do what you're doing. Like, my ability to book work anywhere gave us the opportunity to then become mobile. And so not long after that, we had sold the house, we had sold most of our stuff, put the rest into a pod, had an old vintage trailer. And with Mabel, when she was 6 weeks old, this is child number 4, we left to live on the road, and we did that for a year, traveling the country. And I had booked shoots all around the country, and we just went from one place to the next, and I would do shoots, and then we would just enjoy it as a family the rest of the time. But it was a very exhausting season.
Like, you see the images of a trailer parked in some beautiful scenic area, and what you don't see is like kids throwing up in the back seat and diaper explosions that are being changed on the side of the road, and all of the less.
Those were like the fun parts, Dave. Really, it was. I mean, it was just, we had never done that before. We were really in over our heads. And I would say the thing that was really hard was I was not really present with my family during that season. I was working so much. When we were driving in between, I was editing the seat, like yelling back at the kids that I couldn't be with them or couldn't help them. Donnie and I were really kind of living isolated lives, even though we were living together. You know, this is kind of the theme of all of my success, as you could put it, maybe, is that it has been equal parts wonderful, but also very exhausting. And we put ourselves in these situations where, for my husband and I, we really saw the worst of ourselves and each other a good portion of the time. We're doing this and we're not really that happy, but I have thousands, tens of thousands of followers on Instagram along for the journey, telling us how we're living their dream life, and, you know, we must be so happy. And I hadn't reached the point in my heart yet where I felt like I could even admit those sadnesses to myself, let alone express that to a community that was watching.
Was the message you were telling yourself, I should be happy, I should be happy?
I think it was just, what did we do? During that time where we were like doing the best we could to sustain this presence of, this is a dream, this is totally happy, we're not exhausted. Like, we had a 6-week-old, you know, it's just insane. No one was sleeping. Yahoo News contacted us to do a segment on us for their website. And so they came and spent a day with us and interviewed us, and they put out a 6-minute segment. And when you would go to Yahoo, just on the homepage, we were right there.
Wow.
And so, yeah, there was millions of views, and that was really hard for me because, of course, I read the comments, and there were so many so many hurtful things that were said. It was a great segment. They did a beautiful job. But, people were like, who do they think they are, endangering these children on the road? I'm sure they're like sponging off the government. This is a CPS kind of
Oh my
situation.
gosh.
It was just very hard for me to take. And in that time, because they had put my Instagram there, I think I gained 40,000 followers in a week. And a good portion of those people were there just to criticize
Whoa.
us, which is that was very difficult for me to handle.
And now you have 40,000 more haters
Yeah.
following you.
I mean, most of the people were they wanted to just see how we were doing it. There was so much intrigue. And of course, now it's become like a common thing. Full-time families is like, and I also have a lot more wisdom now of like people just say a lot of things based upon how they feel that really have nothing to do with us.
Right.
But I really absorbed all of that. And that, I think it really sent me into a depression. I wasn't sure how to manage that. I just wanted to do my art and like be with my family. And now I was trying to figure out how to sustain being present there while also feeling very attacked.
So when you mapped out that year on the road, was there an end date at that point? Like, did you know we're just going to do this for a year?
We had committed to 10 months of sessions on the road. And so I knew we had to make it through that end. We had spent almost a year traveling the country. And so we said, where do we want to move? We had sold all of our stuff. We had sold our house, and it gave us this opportunity to really pick anywhere. And that is when we thought, where did we love? And we found a house on an apple orchard on Craigslist and just rented it sight unseen and just drove up to Bellingham, Washington, almost to Canada, and just landed, walked into this unfurnished house that we had rented online, and all of us just laid down on the floor, and that's where we lived for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
I was hustling for so long and so hard, and also having babies, and there was just so much happening in my life. I just never stopped to breathe. And so I think once we moved to Bellingham after we lived on the road, and it gave me time to rest, I think I just kind of went into a deep hibernation of the soul. I'm not exactly sure. It was like all of those lessons set in, and I started thinking, I am not satisfied. I don't want to keep doing this work of having people pretend and like documenting that as if it honors them as true and whole people, because I knew it was only showing one side of it. And not that that's bad. We need that. We need these beautiful moments of hope, these moments of joy. But you can only fully embrace those moments of happiness if you acknowledge the grief that comes alongside it. And so I think in those 2 years living in Bellingham, I spent a lot of time writing. We experienced a winter for the first time. I was from Southern California, and I'd never experienced like a real winter with snow and winds where you just have to hide in the bathroom because the storm's so bad. And I got to have all these experiences of living a full life. We had an apple orchard that was near us. I spent a lot of time walking outside barefoot. Like, I started to get in touch with myself as a whole being, a child of God, a little child again, a way that I hadn't accessed that for many years. And I started to really think, how can I incorporate the documentation, the telling of the true whole story, not just the highlight reel? And that, I think, is what catapulted me through a million small leaps of faith into the work I'm doing now. I thought about the times in my career when I had been happiest, and not just in my career, but when that joy spilled out into my family. And those had always been the times where I was able to have extended amount of time with people, really see who they are, And I sat down and I thought, what would I want a photographer to do for me that is the deepest cry of my heart, the strongest expression of my artistry, and my family won't suffer. Instead, they will actually benefit from this change. And I called them harvest sessions, which said it's the harvest of everything that you've planted. And when you're harvesting, you're also seeing what didn't make it. And I want to be with you in your home when you're digging through the muck of that, no matter what season you're in. And the first session that I did like that I was hired to do, was a family that was considering getting a divorce. And they said, okay, you want to show this? Like, you want to do this? Great. We want to hire you. And we want you to show us what hope is here to see if this marriage is worth saving.
Wow.
Did you find that out before you arrived? It was like you went in.
I knew.
Wow.
Yes.
How did that feel?
To be honest, it felt like every other family I've ever photographed. And it really made me think about that because, we had been through our own share of difficulty in our marriage, which really so much of it is based on not communicating and not having time for each other, which is a common theme, I think, for married people with children. And so they told me all these things. There was no hiding what was going on. But I got there and they were fully engaged. They just thought, well, the flame has gone out, like, is it even worth keeping this hope here, like, as a family? What's the harvest? They wanted to see the harvest, and they thought, okay, like, I had blogged about this, talked all about what I wanted. And so, when I announced it on Instagram, I didn't have much of a response because I think people had to really think about that for a while, if they even wanted that. And this family, they knew, like, hey, like, we have nothing left to lose. Like, let's see if she can see hope that we can't see ourselves. And so it was this wonderful challenge of when I was with them, trying to make the invisible visible. And so when they were engaging with each other, like, they would talk to each other across the kitchen, and you would never know they were contemplating getting a divorce. And I would see the way that she would smile at him, and he would, give her a smack on the butt, things like that, where I just thought maybe this is so normal to them that they've forgotten that it's special. And so I was looking for those kinds of things. I loved the challenge. It felt like a real gift. And so it just felt like confirmation that I was walking towards my grander purpose. And they actually are still married.
Wow.
But I did start taking video footage when I was there with them, because there were several opportunities where I thought, oh, I need to see this in motion. Like, this is a family. I had the weight, I felt, and maybe this is not the case, right? I'm sure it's not, but like, I felt like I had the weight of the decision of this family on my shoulders. And so I was desperate to gather any bits of goodness that I could. And so I just started taking video clips during it. And that was the beginning of me shooting video, not because I thought I want to be a videographer, but I just needed to express that hope in an even more tangible way. And it just felt like every step along the way, God was kind of giving me these opportunities and saying, you can just kind of do the work that you've been asked to do, or you can dive even deeper in, and I'm going to grow you because of it in a way that you can't even understand yet. It's imperfection. And I think it might be shocking at first to see, like, if you're used to everything looking perfect and that's all you put out, and then someone shows you a picture of what you look like before you've put your makeup on and with your bed head, and it's like symbolic of that in a sense, of like vulnerability is a little staggering. And I think it takes time for the value of that to set in. First, you can't look at the pictures, but then in time, you need them desperately.
It made me think about how you actually took some pictures of our family for our Christmas photos, like just our yearly family portrait session. And we had to choose what's the image that we're going to send to like our circle of friends. And that decision is based on the fact that like a bunch of them haven't necessarily seen our girls in a long time. And so we wanted to find like an image that's like kind of closer to stock, right? It's kind of like this is the image that like people would expect. But for us, some of our favorite images were,
The more candid moments.
yeah, like there's a moment where I'm just sort of like talking to one of the girls, my mouth's like a little bit open, and it's just something that's true, and that feels like the real treasure from that moment in time is like, oh, there we are, as opposed
I love
to
that.
like the family that we're trying to portray so that we can send a cute photo to all of our friends.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that. I love that you think of it in a way that is similar to the way I think of it too.
And I think we forget because we think, I have eyeballs, I'm living my life. I can see this moment, like I'm living it. But there's something about pausing. It's like it's almost this gift of like an out of body experience where you're able to like push pause, leave the frame and look at it from the outside. And there's something about the perspective that gives you that is such a gift.
Yes. So I did those harvest sessions, traveled several times a month to different places of the country all over. I would spend 24 hours a day with families. I would get there the night before. I would sleep on their couch. I would normally stay up late with the parents talking about their daily schedule, what we're going to do the next day. I would hear the truth from them. We would be cuddled up on their couch and they would just tell me the real thing. So establishing that level of trust was, I think, by far the most important part of that process, so that they just felt like they could really be themselves without judgment the following day when they're with their family. And it really became a very special experience because when people are being documented, they behave better, which isn't not all bad, right? It's very good, but they would often have to not have their phone in their hands all day, and they would have to be present. And so the experience of me being there forced them to have basically 24 hours of uninterrupted time being present with their families without being distracted. And for so many of them, they would say, I'm so thankful for the pictures. They would say this before I left. I'm so thankful and excited to see them, but really it has been so worth every penny just for you to be here to give us the experience of being present with one another.
Wow.
It really opened up my mind to thinking, like every awareness, every comment that someone would say, it would get into my mind and I would just keep kind of subconsciously researching how to keep deepening those avenues of my work.
Yeah, I mean, I was picturing, how would I feel if you were in our house documenting 24 hours? And, there are so many evenings where we're trying to decide, like, do we play a family game night or do we just watch a movie? And it's so easy to just watch a movie. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's like, those are not where the memories are made. It's when we're sitting around the table, interacting and engaging with one another. But it's like, it takes an extra effort. And so many times it's just easier to say, let's just veg out,
Yeah. I would have these experiences where the children, that maybe they would need to be disciplined or, a normal day, like there might be screaming or something like that. And so that the parents, because they were being documented and oftentimes filmed, they would recognize it was almost like a self-correcting prophecy or something, because they would realize, I'm being recorded. How can I respond as the parent I wish I was in this moment, instead of, if I wasn't there, maybe they would have been like, just go to your room, or, just go watch a show, or, or something. But in that moment, they had to choose how to interact with that child in a way that they would be proud to watch it back. And so I think it really forced a lot of families in a way that was difficult, but also really beneficial to see what they really are capable of as parents. Every session I got, because these families were choosing it, they weren't just booking me for Christmas cards. They knew what I was going for. Like they knew what they were walking into, and that it might be difficult. And they had the acknowledgement of that, and they chose it anyway. And so just that decision laid the framework for so much truth telling in the photographs that it made me feel really enthralled. And so it felt like with each family that I walked into, I was spending so much time being present watching them. Everything in their house, like little notes that they would leave for their spouse taped to the kitchen window, pictures that they had framed of people that they would tell me the stories. And it just felt like I wasn't just a fly on the wall. I was really a part of their family, and they were telling me every bit of the family history. And it just felt like I was so filled up. And so this one family, I went into their house. This is in Dallas. They had all of these quotes around their house that said, be still and know. I mean, it was a theme. It was in every room, and they had a big house. There was that in every room. And I said, you have this verse in every room. What does it mean to you? Or, what's the symbolism of it to you? And I was always asking people what things symbolize to them, because it's often that people put things in their home, but they don't really think about why, or maybe it's a subconscious thing. And so God was making it so clear that I look at that verse, like that was teaching me something that whole 24 hours. And I remember the dad explaining that verse to me, and it really changed my perspective about so many things. And he said, well, when I look at that verse, some people might think you have to be still and not move, but the way I see it is stillness is in motion, like a bird flying, that you're not still, you're actually coasting and flying really fast, but you're not going against the wind. You're letting the wind carry you. And so that verse, be still and know that I am God, it's because my arms are lifted and I'm being carried and I have peace, but I'm still in motion. And that blew my mind. It made me think, oh my gosh, it has been so hard for me to just be still my entire life, and especially since my career began. And it helped me to think about faith and stillness in completely new ways. It has really deepened the way that I think about photographing stillness.
One of the things about Joy's story that sticks out to me is just how much happier Joy was working in anonymity than all the stress that came from being in the limelight. Even though it's really fun to have your moment on a national stage, it brings so much pressure and potential for overwhelm that it's often hard for the benefits to outweigh the costs. And that's not to say that it can't be done, but it can just be much more challenging than people might think.
Yeah, there's kind of an assumption that after you become known by a bunch of people, all of your problems go away. But it actually just ends up presenting a bunch of new problems instead.
That's so true. The big lesson is to find what kind of work and lifestyle brings you fulfillment and meaning and purpose.
I mean, if you have a noble calling on your life, whether it's raising kids or trying to display beauty to people or helping people do their taxes, it's the kind of thing that you would do for free just because it brings you joy. All right, in order to wrap up Joy's story, we need to go back in time all the way to 2001. And it was the year of the two Lauras and the helium balloon. JJ, have you heard this story?
No.
This is a crazy story. I was doing research just to see, like, okay, what happened in 2001 at the beginning of Joy's story.
Okay.
And I ran across this story from Staffordshire, England. And this girl, Laura Buxton, was 10 years old. She had a helium balloon, and she attached her name and address on it and sent it up into the air, hoping to find a pen pal whenever it came down. And the balloon traveled 140 miles away from her in England and landed in some farmer's field. And he takes a look at the card, and it says Laura Buxton on it. Guess what his neighbor's daughter's name was?
Nuh-uh.
Laura Buxton.
What?
Yes. And it turns out the Lauras shared a bunch of similar things. And the Lauras, at least as of a few years ago, met together on a regular basis.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah, Laura and Laura.
Laura and Laura.
And they were both, they were actually both 10-year-old girls.
What? The same age?
Yeah. And they were super similar heights.
What?
Uh-huh. It is crazy. Look it up, people.
Wow.
Laura Buxton and the amazing 2001 balloon extravaganza.
Okay.
Well, while the Lauras were having an incredible year, Joy found herself on an international trip that would change her life forever. Take it away, JJ.
Act 1, Show Truth. When she was 19, Joy traveled to Cambodia with a group from her church. She brought her camera along, but she wasn't exactly free to roam around the country since she was attached to a group. But that trip made a mark on her, and it didn't take long before she was ready to return to Cambodia again. This act includes a government facility, a 1-hour photo, and a ride on the back of a motorcycle.
I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so I decided, I think I'm going to take my camera and I'm going to take my journal and I'm going to go back by myself for 6 weeks. And there were some missionaries that were living there. They said that I could stay with them and they had some things that I could do to help them out. And in the free time, I could just explore with my camera. So I went back for 6 weeks and I felt free as a bird. I didn't have any obligations that were holding me back at that point. So there was one day that I was with these missionaries. They were going to take some food to some families that lived in an AIDS facility. And this was a facility that was government owned. The people could not leave. If they were born there, they were basically going to stay there for their lives. It was just basically concrete rooms with one small window, and there were hammocks and maybe a bunk bed and a small table, and the families would be quarantined to that space, and they could interact with the other families, but it was basically they were going to be living there long term and dying there.
So, it's almost a prison.
It was basically like a prison, yes. So I had my camera with me and just slung around my shoulder all the time. And I went into this one family's room and I was bringing some food in to leave it with them. And I was just going quick in and out of these rooms, just saying hi. There was children that were so sweet that would always welcome me. And this room that I walked into, a woman had just given birth, just right there in the room. The placenta was next to her. She had ice on her stomach. The glow on her face was something I will never forget. She was so full of joy. And she was just staring at her baby that was literally laying next to her on a piece of fabric, still connected to the placenta with the cord. And it was like she was just admiring this beautiful baby. And people were all around and they were all happy. And I couldn't help but take my camera out and take a picture of them because they were just so full of joy. And what a profound moment I had just walked in on. I said hello. And of course, we didn't speak the same language, so that was quite difficult to interact. I started to turn to leave, and this mother started hollering at me. And I turned back around and I looked at her, and she grabbed her baby, still connected to the placenta, and she takes her baby and pulls my shirt down and tries to see if her baby will nurse on me. Ugh. And then she pulled down her shirt, and she was trying to explain to me, which I understood later after talking to a translator, that she was explaining that she didn't have milk because she had AIDS and she was not able to produce milk. Of course, I don't think her milk would have come in at that point, but I think she was just thinking, worst case scenario, I'm not going to be able to provide for this new baby. And I knew how much she loved that baby. And she grabbed a blanket, put the baby in a blanket, and gave the baby to me and kept telling me, go, 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 go. She wanted me to take her baby because I was a white woman that probably would be able to take care of her baby, I think she thought. And it was a really confusing moment for me. I felt really sad for her. I, of course, had not been a mother at this point, so I didn't understand the depth of love a mother would have for her child, and still moments after decide it would be better to send that child with this stranger. And it was such a visceral moment of feeling so connected as women. She was holding my breast and she was showing me hers and holding this new baby with the placenta hanging down. And I said, I'm sorry, no. And I sat with them for a little while and held the baby, and I was in shock and I had to leave. The missionaries were leaving. I had to go. So I handed the baby back to her and just tried to show my deep appreciation and love for them. And I left. And of course, it hit me right after we left the out of the gates, and I just started weeping, and it was a very profound moment. And I still try to make sense of that in my mind, of that depth of love. But I realized that not long after that I had taken some photos of them. There was a 1-hour photo place near the hostel that I was staying in. And so I just thought, like, no big thing. I had been getting 1-hour photo done for basically my entire life. And this was still shooting film back then. So I took my film to the 1-hour photo place, got it developed, saw the pictures, and it was this picture of all of them together in that room smiling. It was so beautiful. And so I just knew that if that was me, I would want the photo. And so before I left for those 6 weeks, I found an opportunity to take a moto taxi. That's how you got around there, riding on the back of a motorcycle with someone taking you around the city. And so I hopped on the back of a motorbike taxi, and it took me to the AIDS facility, and I walked to their room with this photo. There were several of them that were kind of around just right after she had given birth. And I said hi, and I didn't have a translator with me again, so I couldn't understand, but I wanted to give them this picture. And of course, this is before I had ever taken family pictures for anyone. This was basically the first family picture I had ever taken as a photographer. She remembered me. She gave me a hug. She was so sweet. I gave her the picture, and she held it in her hands, and she dropped to the ground, and she started calling for the other people to come over, and she's come, and I don't remember exactly what she was saying, but she kept showing it to them. And it was clear by the way that she was expressing it that, like, they didn't have family pictures, like that wasn't a thing. In their room, there was maybe some drawings, maybe a few pieces of fabric. Like, they did not have a family picture. And what I learned later after talking to one of the missionaries I was staying with is he was saying there's a good chance that they have never even experienced an opportunity of seeing a camera, let alone being photographed, because this is not a digital camera. They couldn't see themselves on the back. It just looked like a black box. I was just profoundly affected by the way that seeing themselves on an image could be so emotional. She was weeping on the ground and so thankful. She kept saying, thank you, thank you. She had her hands in like a prayer shape and just kind of like kept bowing to me. And I kept saying, get up, and hugging her. And I just thought, oh, this is just such a small thing. But to her, it was something that she had never had or never even knew was possible. And it seemed almost impossible to her. And it completely changed the way that I viewed photographs. When I came home with those pictures and I was able to show them to people, what I did start to understand was that there was a capacity to tell a story through a photo in a way that I had not acknowledged before. And it made me want to do it and dive deeply into stories. And so that's why in my career, it's like, I'm never just satisfied with just snapping a photo. It has to show truth. It has to show hope and grief and beauty and difficulty and the embrace of all of them all together at once. And that experience that I had in Cambodia did that all at the same time.
I mean, it's almost like it's come full circle where now you're shooting almost in a similar way as you were in that tiny little room in Cambodia.
Yes. It wasn't an intention that I had of going into that AIDS facility and finding my calling in photography, but I was curious. I was curious to see the way other people lived. I had grown up in such a sheltered environment. Having the opportunity to see someone else's story lived out in a brave and unbelievable way, I still would have wanted to communicate those stories no matter where I was documenting. The photos were just a way for me to express telling someone's story. And what I've realized over all these years is it really didn't matter how I did it. The way that I've transitioned from photography to videography to teaching close up, and no matter what expression it is, it's me trying to get to the bottom of someone's story and then tell it back to them in a way where they see beauty in it.
Well, I can personally attest to what an amazing job Joy is doing telling people's stories.
Her work has touched so many lives, and it's amazing to think that it kind of all started in that little room back in Cambodia.
Yeah, I'm really glad she went on that trip.
Me too.
Well, before we wrap up the show, we have one more segment, and we like to call it...
Let's rewind the tape!
Joy creates photos and videos that merge her subject stories with truth and beauty.
But her documentary style wouldn't exist if she hadn't first taken posed photos of babies and families.
And many of her clients wouldn't have found her at all if it weren't for a segment on the TV program Entertainment Tonight.
But the birth of Joy's passion for photography can be traced years before that to a family photo she took in a small room in Cambodia.
To find out more about Joy, visit wildflowersphotos.com. That's wildflowersphotos.com.
This episode of Instrumental was produced by me, JJ Heller.
And me, Dave Heller.
Our theme music is my song, Big Love, Small Moments.
That I helped write.
To find out more about me, listen to more of my songs, or watch my music videos, please visit jjheller.com. That's 2 letter J's, HELLER.com.
We'll be back next week with another episode of Instrumental.
So be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.